murdering a bunch of people I don't know. So we open on a woman who's walking into this very heavily lit green kitchen/utility room. The entire room is green. She flips the lights on and the regular color comes on, and she calls for what I presume is either her husband or her boyfriend. The lights go back to green and she discovers that she's locked inside. We see the feet of a man approaching her as she pleads for her life and screams. Cut to Chloe, a podcaster, recapping the murder we just witnessed of a woman named Lucy Miller. There are 3 or 4 other victims related to the MO of the serial killer she's covering, coined the bombshell murders. She's blonde with a blunt bob and says she herself could have wound up a victim, so I guess this moniker comes from being blonde. I notice in her podcast studio she has a neon light that says XOXO, which seems entirely inappropriate for the subject at hand. She checks the message boards on her podcast, which seems to have mixed reviews ranging from, I hope she catches the killer, I really like this podcast, to, I think this woman is a little too into murder. Red herring, I don't know. The next day, she gets a call from a reporter digging up information, and Chloe says she's not interested, and hangs up on her. So, we got to Chloe running for her life on a treadmill and beating the crap out of a punching bag. I mean, just like going full force. And I guess to show just how tough she is. But then we see she isn't as tough as we thought, as she awakens from a nightmare to study her bulletin board, trying different murders to... Okay, let me try this again. But then we see she isn't as tough as we thought, as she awakens from like a night terror and goes to study her bulletin board that tie these different murders to each other in the middle of the night. She drops her cup of coffee for no reason and it crashes to the floor. She hops back onto the podcast and explains that the boyfriends of the victims don't fit the serial killer's motives and wonders who is next. Later, Chloe is driving and gets another call from the reporter. Chloe stresses her desire for anonymity, to which the reporter says something along the lines of, well, I found you. Is that another red herring? I don't know. Chloe pulls up to a house for sale and meets up with a man named Carl to investigate the scene of a crime, as if that's even legal. My assumption is that she's pretending to be interested in purchasing the house despite not saying so. After Carl gives her some freedom to roam around, Chloe begins recording her podcast on her phone. Carl notices what she's up to, so she pretends to be on the phone with someone and is late for a coffee date. He inquires what that's about, and she says that it's for an article. Then Carl snaps a picture of her as she walks away. Back at home, Chloe does some research on Carl on something called Swifty Search, which is supposed to be like Google, but it says Swifty Search. I don't know why they couldn't have come up with a better name for that, but who knows. She finds his realty page, but no police records. So she heads to the gym and is getting checked out by this good-looking guy. She busts her knuckles too hard on the punching bag, and he offers to help bandage her hand. We find out his name is Josh. I'm already convinced he's the killer. He's too cute and way too concerned to not be the killer. At home, Chloe gets a call from someone named Ellie, another blonde, telling her to come out and have a drink together. She says something like, let's get to know each other, so I'm assuming this is the journalist who called earlier. Chloe agrees to meet, then Ellie calls someone we don't see and says, hey, it's me, I'm in. The two So Chloe reveals that she went so far as to change her name due to the stalking that she encountered in college. And Ellie's like, I hopped on this story because I feel like I know you. Another red herring? I don't know. Chloe goes on to describe her passion for true crime podcasting, yada yada yada. After some more wine, they leave the bar together and open up about being afraid to date after their bad experiences before saying goodnight. Over at Ellie's house, she gets a call from this unknown person, again while browsing the Bombshell Murders website, and says, maybe we shouldn't go through with this, so she's up to something. Back at the gym, Chloe is running at literal full speed and sees something about her podcast being broadcast on the local news channel. Then she runs into Josh, who invites her out for coffee, to which she reluctantly agrees. Over coffee, Chloe reveals her interest in writing in a true crime book, while Josh says that he's working in advertising, selling ad spaces in business catalogs. Then he asks her out to dinner, and she again reluctantly says yes. Later, Ellie and Chloe get together over more wine at one of their houses and talks about her upcoming date with Josh. Then the conversation moves into the actual interview, but not before Ellie fills Chloe's glass full of wine again. What Chloe knows is this: Lucy Miller was the most recent victim, and her primary suspect had a solid alibi. Then we get into the dramatization of Amber Smalton, a nurse who specializes in home care. The killer lured her into a house to which she thought was a potential patient and then murdered her. Then there was Emma Jacobs. She was tied up, abducted, and taken into the woods. Ellie tries to understand this particular murder because it involved chasing, to which Chloe responds, I don't know, I think some killers try to attack someone who wronged them in their life. The musical score grows kind of sharp and for a second as if we got a major clue here. Ellie inquires about the other murder, but Chloe then realizes they've already downed 2 bottles of wine and offers Ellie to stay the night since they're unable to drive, and to discuss the other murder later. We see Ellie in the bathroom talking to the mystery person on the phone and tells them, yeah, we're still in the middle of it. We just had too much wine. That night, Ellie wakes up to Chloe having a night terror, and Ellie wakes her up. I think it's funny they're still in perfect makeup, perfect jewelry, and in the middle of the night, their hair is still great. While talking to each other, Ellie looks at Chloe's arm and bites a giant scar across her wrist and insists that maybe this is all too much for her. Ellie leaves her and heads down to the home podcast studio and breaks into Chloe's laptop and notes. She also finds a bottle of medication on the desk, but it doesn't allude to what the pills actually are. I'm starting to think Ellie is getting too close to her subject in order to avoid being caught, but we as the audience really don't know that yet. The next morning, Chloe and Ellie cheers over a cup of coffee, and Josh texts Chloe for a dinner date. Chloe explains her hesitancy to meeting new people again, and Ellie points out, but you let a journalist you don't even know stay at your house, so why are you scared to meet this guy? So it goes to nighttime, and Chloe receives a message that says, I know who you really are, right before Josh finds and interrupts her to grab dinner. They have a boring conversation, and Ellie covers up the cuts on her arms while they talk about their backgrounds. Chloe admits she doesn't have any family or friends in her life, and Josh seems a little taken aback, but cuts the tension by asking her to share their pasta together. Then she tells Josh she's not actually a book writer, but a podcaster, and discovers true crime murders in the area. Or that she covers true crime murders in the area. They have a decent date and agree to see each other again. I really hope he's not the killer, because I think right now it's Ellie. At home, Chloe gets another message that says, if you want to keep your anonymity, it will cost you. You have 1 week. So she calls Ellie and asks to fast track their interview together. Ellie then calls the Burt mystery person and says, "Hey, we got her." Later on, Josh comes over to Chloe's for Netflix and chill. Of course, he picks a horror movie. Chloe starts having flashes of all the murders and runs out of the room during the film. So Josh follows behind, and she tells him that about her college stalker, and the stalker apparently broke into her house with a knife, and she barely got away, left the college, and changed her identity and her name. As soon as Josh says he's sorry to hear that, she kisses him, and they agree to another date. The next day over coffee, Ellie and Chloe dish about the date with Josh and jump into the interview. Ellie's first question is about Chloe's family and how she never talks about them. Chloe tells her she was raised by her mom, who was depressed and distracted and died of cancer, and that she never knew her dad at all. Then she goes into the murder they never discussed, the murder of Megan Hansen. Killed in her own house. As a college student, no sign of forced entry or a shakeup, but she was stabbed to death. Chloe tried to inquire, but her family just wanted to move on and her college friends seemed distant. Then Chloe admits she knew Megan, and they were new friends who mostly hung out at the gym, which is how she met her stalker through mutual friendship. Then when the second murder happened, she got a feeling the killings were somehow connected because the two girls looked similar. All of a sudden, Josh walks into the coffee shop and is like, "Well, I didn't expect to see you here." And Chloe introduces Josh to Ellie, to which Josh says, "So you're the journalist?" And Ellie says, "Guilty as charged." Something doesn't feel right here. I wonder if they know each other. The ominous music that's playing in the background would say yes. Ellie suddenly just seems distracted and avoids Chloe's question as if she needs anything else for the interview. Wait, I think I read that wrong. I said Ellie suddenly seems distracted and avoids Chloe's question if she needs anything else for the interview. At night, Ellie comes home as another car pulls up behind her. After changing into a bathroom, she hears the sound of her front door become unlatched and finds it unlocked. The next day, Chloe sits in her studio in front of the microphone and struggles to discuss what's on her mind. But she calls Josh instead with no answer. She calls him again outside of the gym, this time at night, and still no answer. Then she gets a text from Ellie saying something like her editor is taking longer on the story than she previously anticipated. Inside the empty gym, she runs on the treadmill and gets a cryptic text that says, "You have until tomorrow." When she leaves the gym, she sees what appears to be Josh and another woman kissing outside of the bar. I wasn't sure at first if this was Ellie or not, but it turns out it was Ellie. The camera shot so far away, you're not really sure at first. But yeah, it's Josh and Ellie kissing. Chloe freaks out and hops into her car and follows them to their house. And she asks herself, "What am I doing?" and drives off. She speeds down the freeway crying and feeling betrayed and goes home. She searches police records on her computer for Josh and finds nothing. Another cryptic text comes across and says, "Last warning, you know who I am," and some other stuff I can't read on the text. So it turns out the culprit who's been texting her is Carl, the realtor. She drives up to him the next day and he asks, "Where's my money?" And she's like, "You have no leverage over me. This is blackmail, and one call to the police and this will be over and done with." He begs her to keep it a secret and that he won't tell anyone. He's just a fan of the podcast and saw an opportunity to sell a home in a neighborhood that really isn't doing very well. Chloe runs home and decides to address the killer directly on her podcast. She's saying things like, "Where are you? Are you just resisting killing again until the monster inside can't be contained anymore?" Her phone beeps. It's Ellie asking if she's alright. Outside of her house, we see Josh in a black hoodie spying on her through the window. Then flashback to Chloe being followed and watched by him in various locations she's frequented throughout the film. So Josh is definitely somehow involved. world. He's been following her. Later, Chloe calls Ellie and says, I just finished my last podcast episode. I think it's time to move on. Would it be okay if I came over to get the last payment from you tomorrow for our interview together? To which Ellie agrees. Okay, so cut to the 5,000th time we've seen Chloe sprinting on the treadmill and beating the crap out of a punching bag. Josh approaches her and she's like, I'm not interested. I don't want to hear from you again. This is odd because they never had this conversation that she saw him out with another woman, but they both seem to act as if this conversation did happen, which leads me to believe there may have been a deleted scene somewhere. That night, Ellie drives to some deserted house with no cell phone reception. She enters and calls out Chloe's name. Chloe responds from the darkness. Ellie Manchester, the fifth and final victim of the bombshell killer, was lured to an abandoned wine shelter where no one would hear her scream. So, Chloe is the killer after all, the main character. She starts going on about how she started killing women who betrayed her. We also discover this is how she got cuts on her arms while she was trying to kill people that she was trying to cover up earlier. Her first victim stole the guy that she liked. Her second victim got a new group of friends who didn't like her. Her third victim, fell victim because she was a self-absorbed nurse who cared more about her own praise than helping other people, according to Chloe. And Chloe's fourth victim, she met at a gym and discovered this woman was looking for a house, so she pretended to be a realtor. She weirdly doesn't explain what this particular victim did to piss her off at the time. Ellie asks, why did you do the podcast? And Chloe says, I wanted to be close to them and removed any clues from my trail by creating a profile of someone completely different. Chloe pulls out a knife on Ellie and Ellie admits, I wasn't creating a story on you. I was getting you to confess. Suddenly, the cops jump out, including Josh, who all have Chloe cornered. Josh reveals his name is Jack Hansen, and his sister is Megan Hansen, who was one of the victims, so he has a personal vendetta against her. Ellie also reveals that Megan was her best friend growing up. They had her in their sights all along, so this one actually surprised me for a Lifetime movie. Ellie and Josh were working together with the police to catch Chloe as the killer, even though Chloe was the one pretending to be the investigator as the podcast murders investigator. So Josh says he got Chloe figured out immediately when she called him for a podcast interview early on, and apparently Chloe mentioned some story nobody knew besides Josh. Nobody knew besides Josh, Megan, and Chloe. Josh also admits that Ellie is his fiance and they worked in tandem to catch the killer together. The police put Chloe, whose real name is Rebecca Wagner, in handcuffs and under arrest for the murders of 4 women. In the end, Josh and Ellie start their own podcast about the adventures in capturing the killer of his sister and the other innocent victims involved. Quite the caper. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this quick recap of the podcast murders, a Real One entertainment production on Lifetime. If you like this, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories about bad movies and my recaps of them told quietly through ASMR. Thanks and have a good one.